to the show tonight. My name is Abdul Hayi Mumin, and this is Moment Tonight. And tonight we take a look at Parliament in the last 1 year. Briefly, I will take you through a summary of what we here at GBC have been following of the activities, some of the main issues that have arisen in Parliament right from the 6th of January 2021 until about now, and then later on we'll bring you a conversation with the Speaker of Parliament, Right Honourable Alban Bagbin, who spoke to us on a number of issues. We'll be bringing you that interview also pretty shortly. But let me take you through some of the main activities as we captured here from the point of view of GBC in the last 1 year. And on the 6th of January, I personally was in Parliament and I observed a number of the things that had happened. Of course, we are aware that after the elections, it was clear that no party had a clear majority in Parliament. And on the eve of January 6, 2021, the life and activities of the 7th Parliament ended when it was dissolved, and that paved the way for the 8th Parliament to come to life. Now, the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic was then brought to life on the dawn of January 7, 2021, and the new members were sworn into office. But before then, a number of issues that arise in Parliament on that night leading to that dawn. The opposition National Democratic Congress, NDC, proposed Honourable Alban Bagbin as their choice candidate for the Speaker of Parliament, while the New Patriotic Party proposed the then incumbent Professor Aaron Michael Quay, who served as Speaker for the 7th Parliament from 2017 until 2021. Of course, so these nominations were done, and we are aware of all the fisticuffs that took place ahead of the election of the Speaker. On the night, the NDC group at the time had arrived in Parliament much earlier than the MPP group, and they had taken the side that usually you would find the majority in the House sitting. When the MPP members-elect arrived in Parliament on that night, they didn't take kindly to the fact that their opponents were sitting on the side that they thought they had the majority and therefore had to sit there. Of course, we do know that even before the voting started, ballot boxes were snatched and kicked. Parliamentarians sat on each other's laps, insisting that they had to sit on a particular chair at a given time, and so on. Of course, we do know that the Member of Parliament for Tema West at the time, Honourable Carlos Ahenkra, did the unexpected when he snatched and counted ballot papers in the Speaker of Parliament's election at the time and attempted to bolt with those ballot papers. Of course, he was accosted by some of the NDC members in the House at the time, and that also led to the military storming the Chamber of Parliament for the very first time. Military men came to Parliament, the chamber itself, and attempted to restore. The armed soldiers stormed the Chamber of Parliament following the continued failure of the members of Parliament to elect the Speaker for the 8th Parliament. The soldiers who were numbering, and I was there, I saw it, about 20, emerged in the chamber together with armed policemen to restore calm in the chamber. Some of the MPs elected at the time did not take kindly, especially those on the side of the NDC, to the presence of the military in the chamber on the night. Of course, calm was then restored later on after ups and downs coupled with chaotic scenes in Parliament on that night. Calm was restored and the counting of votes to elect the Speaker went on. At the end of the counting, the former Member of Parliament for Nadoli Kaleu, a member of the opposition National Democratic Congress, Honourable Alban, Kingsford, Sumana, Bagbin was elected as the Speaker of the 8th Parliament. Mr. Bagbin, who was the second Deputy Speaker in the previous Parliament, won the election with 138 votes as against his only contender, Professor Aaron Makukwe, who polled 136 votes. The House further appointed, or if you like, elected the MP for Bekwai, Joseph Osei-Wusu, as the first Deputy Speaker. And then we'll be focusing on Honorable Joseph Osei-Wusu and some of his actions in recent times, which also led to some fisticuffs in very recent times as well. Of course, the MP for Mina in the Ashanti region, Honorable Andrew Siama Amoako, was also elected as the second Deputy Speaker of the 8th Parliament. Of course, in recent times, his name has also popped up relative to some of the fisticuffs. We'll be talking about that pretty shortly. And in recent times, Parliament has had some problems as well, and that followed the budget that was presented to the House of Parliament by the Finance Minister, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, and the minority side had some concerns relative to the budget statement. Of course, we recall that they had issues that were related to, they wanted the suspension of the e-levy to start with. They wanted the withdrawal of the Ijapa provision made for tidal waves disaster. They asked for proper reconstruction of the wording relating to the ACA energy deal. They wanted a review of the benchmark value for imports, which were the concerns of the minority. Of course, we do know that the budget statement was claimed to have been rejected by the minority side after the majority side of Parliament staged a walkout. And for me as a journalist, that came to me as a surprise, because it was the first time we had recorded the majority side actually walking out of Parliament. The Speaker's seat, of course, the first Deputy Speaker, Honorable Joseph Osei-Wusu, ruling, he was in charge on this particular day. His ruling did not go in favor of the minority. The minority MPs flooded the floor of the House and were joined by the majority side, leading to a chaotic scene where there were some pushing and agitations. In fact, we saw some people attempt to slap others. In the course of this, the NDC MP, who is representing the people of Chairman, grabbed the Speaker's seat to register the minority side's displeasure. The first Deputy Speaker was earlier escorted out of the chamber on that night. The Finance Committee of Parliament approved the e-levy bill despite resistance from the minority caucus, who are on the committee. The bill was approved by voting where there was a tie between the majority and minority, which is 12-12, and the chairman of the committee used his prerogative power to approve the bill. We will talk about all of these happenings in Parliament, but I do not want to take the wind out of the sail of the Speaker of Parliament, who earlier granted me an interview, and I'll sit in the studio and bring you back portions of that interview we did have, and we are currently showing you some of the scenes from Parliament, unfortunate scenes from Parliament. We'll now show the interview. I'll now bring you that interview with the Right Honorable Alban Bagbin, who is the Speaker of the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic of Ghana. And first, I asked him if he had learned, after 28 years of being in Parliament, what lessons had he learned, especially within the last 1 year. That was my first question to him, and this was his answer.
The world should expect. I did not expect it myself, but it came as a surprise as I had rounded up all my activities in a house where I lived for 28 good years, from 7th January 1993 to the 7th of January 2021. I spent almost all my time and day learning, sharing, and leading a number of activities in Parliament and my people in the constituency. I wanted to move into an area I believe I have been able to garner a lot of wealth, which is parliamentary studies. And so I had established and registered an Institute for Parliamentary Studies Africa, together some very notable, distinguished personalities from the universities in Ghana, in Canada, in UK, and in South Africa. This institute was meant to support the development of parliaments in Africa. 2 days to the 7th of January 2021, my beloved great NDC party invited me and conveyed to me their decision to contest for the position of Speaker of the Parliament of the 8th Republic. On the 4th of January 2021, I had gone to bid farewell to my predecessor, Professor Aaron Michael Okui, and wish him well as Speaker. I spent all my life in Parliament. I must say my youthful life in Parliament. And I could not, at this time, reject the offer given me by my party. And so I accepted and then decided to put my network in place to get the members of Parliament from both sides of the political divide. I have friends from both sides. I was loyal to many members of Parliament and activists of the New Patriotic Party for many years. And therefore, I cut across the political divide. And I decided to put my campaign on the ground. So on the 7th of January, before the election started, a spirit descended on me. And I knew I was going to win. How? I didn't know. But it assured me that I was going to win. And so what I did was to prepare all my speeches. Came to the office as the second deputy speaker and was watching the game play out on the floor of Parliament. And as it kept on playing out, I kept on editing my speeches. And my secretary and staff would bail me out on this matter. And so it was not a surprise to me that everything that my opponents did to make sure that I didn't win yielded no fruit. And this Caesarean birth brought a healthy child to lead the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic of Ghana. I've been so grateful to my colleague members of Parliament from both sides of the divide, but more importantly, the God Almighty for this divine delivery and bestowment of leadership of this House. I'm grateful, and I'll continue to be so indebted to both Almighty God, my MPs, the party, and Ghanaians for this support so far. And I hope that it will continue till the end of my tenure of office as Speaker of Parliament of Ghana.
So the Speaker telling us the processes he had to go through, some of his own thoughts just before he was elected Speaker of Parliament, his strategy and so on. But so he was excited to have been elected as Speaker of Parliament. But in the last 1 year, a lot has happened, especially in the last 2 weeks before Parliament went on recess. We saw the violence. In the first week, on the first night that Parliament sat under, just before he was sworn in, we saw the violence and the fisticuffs in Parliament. So I asked him, is he proud of what he has been supervising in the last 1 year?
Nobody will be proud of violence. But it's a process you cannot avoid. And as I said, God's hand is on what is happening in Ghana. God's hand is in whatever is happening in the Parliament of Ghana. We always say that when you sow the wind, you reap a whirlwind. No wonder that the wind that was sowed on the 7th of January was reaped at the end of the year in December of the same year. You sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. It happened to us as a country at the inception of independence. Yet, we haven't taken notice of it. The struggle for independence sowed the wind. And you saw how the eruption came in 66, how it came in 72, how it came in a stronger force in 79. And these are lessons for us to learn. Because you can never reap what you haven't sown. It's what you sow that you reap. That is why we have the wise saying, do unto others as you want others to do unto you. That should govern our lives as a people, as a nation. So it wasn't a surprise to me, because I have read widely, I have listened to wise counsel, I've gone through a lot of experiences. I have taught so many countries and interacted with their parliaments. And I'm now a resource person in the building up of parliaments in the Commonwealth and the Interparliamentary Union. I was the one that led Africa, I should say represented Africa, in the transformation of the Interparliamentary Union into what it is today. And I was leading the parliamentary group in Africa to transform the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And so with that kind of experience, I was not surprised this year ended in fisticuffs, because all the signs were glaring to everybody that the road was not going to be smooth. And until we allowed the other stakeholders of governance to play major roles in the development of the country, by leaving it to only politicians, we will end up in even a more violent situation than we.
So the Speaker says he certainly isn't proud of some of the happenings in Parliament in the last 1 year or so. But he also says he was not surprised, given the fact that some changes had taken place and were yet to get used to those changes. And later on, I'll be asking him questions concerning the composition of Parliament and standing orders and what needs to be done about these things. But there have been some allegations leveled against the Speaker himself, key among which is the fact that his personality tends to be a bit obstructive to the work of Parliament, and that some of the problems emanate from him. I put that question to him as well.
Remember Salas Mensah, a professional accountant, so that we could introduce professionalism into the activities and the sense of public accountability. If you recall, The Public Accounts Committee used to be chaired by the minority leader. And my experience with that of Honorable J.H. Mensah and the First Parliament, Dr. Ajekum, showed that people were more interested in the political gains from the reports of the Auditor General. And so I thought it was not good for good governance. So I moved away from it and gave that opportunity to Honorable Salas Mensah. This Parliament, I have made it clear that I will do all I can to be as impartial as possible. I'm human. I don't know it all. I can make mistakes. But to be categorized as being biased,
or
obstructing government business, or being partial, is just a figment of the imagination of people who have stuck to the old order, where they are used to power, the power of the majority. This is what we want, and we must get it. That is the position. If not, my rulings have shown that I have disagreed with both majority and minority at different times, and I've ruled against both. And so it's really a surprise that because my colleagues, and some of my colleagues, I should say, in Parliament, don't understand that the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic is completely different from the other parliaments of the 4th Republic. There's a change of composition, a change of focus and direction. And that needs a different type of leadership. We cannot continue to use those old rules. We have to develop new rules, the rules that will push forward the decision of the good people of Ghana.
An obstructive personality. His personality has nothing to do with some of the untoward happenings in Parliament. He attributes that mostly to the fact that the composition of Parliament has changed, sort of. 137 against 137 with an independent member making the difference, and so on. But again, one of the issues, so he brought it up and I did follow up on that. The composition of Parliament has often come under scrutiny. So there are those who say we are running a hybrid system, and that hybrid system appears not to be working for us as a country. We're running a Westminster system that is infused, mixed up with the system used in the democratic system in the USA. Is that working for us? Should we change the system at some point in time? The Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament answered this question as well.
My study and experience of parliaments all over the world, parliaments that function and work for its people, are homegrown parliaments or homegrown democracies. And so when you go to the American system, you realize that the root of the American system is a British system. But they departed from it in many ways. Even the British system itself have ceded and accepted reforms. And so the kind of system that we call hybrid, which people claim to be a mixture of the Westminster and the presidential system, is actually not what is in our constitution. We have opted for a different system, a homegrown governance structure. And so we added our traditions and our cultures into the option of governance for this country. And we need to focus on those and develop a system unique to Ghana and not any other country. Our values, our principles, our norms are different from the other countries. And more importantly, our history. You can't forget about it. And the times, the seasons, things are changing. And we must change with the time and seasons. And so, even though people keep on saying a hybrid system, I always prefer to say neither an executive nor a Westminster system. So I always use the term neither nor. And so this is a Ghanaian model of democracy. And that is why I keep on pushing that we need to give other stakeholders, key stakeholders in the Ghanaian society, a role to play in the governance of the country. And I mention them as the traditional rulers who are actually seen as the true leaders of our people. That is recognized over the country. We have excluded them. Our spiritual leaders, and we know the role they play in our lives. They must be given that role to be part of the governance of the country. Our civil society leaders, and more importantly, the bridge between the governors and the governed, the media. All what we do, if the media doesn't carry it to the people, we do it in the dark. And it's important that we just don't allow the media, but we, together with the media players, shape the media in such a way that they serve the common interest of our people, not private interests. That's why I'm one of the advocates of public media and public broadcasting. And I will do everything to support GBC and GTV to develop.
Of course, he speaks about GBC there, but what basically he says is that when I asked him the question about the composition of Parliament, he says what we are doing is gradually growing our own homegrown parliamentary system, which is neither copied from the US nor the Westminster kind of parliament and so on, and that we are running our own home-based system. He says that there is the need to give key stakeholders in the Ghanaian society a role to play in the governance of the country. And then you heard him mention some of those key stakeholders that he refers to as traditional rulers, spiritual leaders, civil society, and particularly he also mentions the media. And then following those words of his, I got curious because following the fisticuffs, first of all, on the 6th of January, which led into the dawn of the 7th of January, and then the fisticuffs that ensued prior to the passing of the budget for the year 2022, there were fisticuffs as well on social media, on mainstream media. The stakeholders that the Honorable Speaker talks about were not particularly excited about Parliament. How does he engage, or how does he intend to engage these ordinary citizens who indeed the parliamentarians, including the Speaker himself, represent in Parliament? Because these are persons who generally find it unacceptable for their representatives to beat each other, to fight each other, to snatch ballot papers in the Honorable House of Parliament. I did pose it to him. How is he going to engage the stakeholders moving forward?
We may move to Tamale or to Sekendi Takoradi or to, and you are moving out, taking government to the people. We will also need to go back and do the regional fora, because we need some type of personnel to support us at all the structures of governance. And so we'll go on next year with the regional fora, and we'll end up with a national forum. The national forum doesn't necessarily mean it will be held in Accra. It can be held in any part of the country, where we give Ghanaians the opportunity to ask questions, to teach us. The fact that you are elected a member of parliament doesn't mean you know all. The fact that I'm a speaker of parliament doesn't mean I know it all. And that is why, since I took office, I have been in constant touch with key development pillars of our country and personnel. And they have been giving me a lot of input on what I do in the country. Not only in Ghana. We have a lot of brains, quality human resource outside Ghana, from Ghana. And I have a platform with them, we interact. And if I make a mistake on the floor, they don't fail to draw my attention. And that is one of the reasons why, even in the composition of the Parliamentary Service Board, I differed from the other speakers by composing it from both sides of the political divide. The last board had the members come from only the MPP. And so you have the two always, usually four, to be appointed by the speaker, apart from the speaker and the clerk. So you have 6 members for the Parliamentary Service Board. The last parliament, it was Honorable Abina Asari and former member Honorable Hakman Owusu Achiman. They were from one political party. This time, I decided to zone on experience, parliamentary experience, and people who are outspoken and who speak truth to power. That is why I zoned on Honorable Abraham Osei Edu and Honorable Johnson Asidu Iketia to be members of the Parliamentary Service Board. And there, they can look, and I've known them, I've worked with both of them, they can look into your face and tell you what they feel. If you are wrong, they tell you you are wrong. That was my main reason for bringing them, not for any purpose. Together with the leaders, the majority and the minority leader, with the clerk and the speaker, we can have a balanced Parliamentary Service Board to be able to lead Parliament well. We need to change the rules. So when people say that I'm changing the rules, I'm changing the rules because the times have changed. We have a different system, a different structure. And we must accept it and work on it to advance the common interests of the people.
Right, Honorable Speaker, Mr. Alban Bagbin says the rules need to be changed. But how do we change those rules? Parliament is also governed by standing orders. Does he believe in changing the standing orders? Can he do that unilaterally? Must he do that using a certain procedure? What are the procedures involved? Is it the case also that once there are standing orders, those standing orders are permanent? Can they be changed at any point in time? Who does the changes? I pose this question to him as well.
We have always struggled with these standing orders from the time of Peter Alajeti, because there are a lot of changes in governance and societies. And as we learn, we try to imbibe the new, evolving new practices. And there's always something to add. But we have promised to at least adore it. Initially, they always approve the standing orders by resolution. We now want to approve them as a constitutional instrument in accordance with Article 11.7. And you see that they talk about orders, and that order is spelled with a capital O, which is the standing orders of Parliament. And that is one of the processes we've gone through. So it's now at the pre-laying stage, where we have referred it to the Committee on Subsidiary Legislation to finalize and present to the House. And so the first quarter of the next meeting, will see the opportunity, will seize the opportunity to enact that instrument. And that instrument is going to take a lot of things into consideration. The key ones I'll draw your attention to: how we can open up parliamentary committees to media scrutiny. So it's not an exception, but it's a rule. As of now, it's an exception. The media can only go into the committee meetings when allowed by the chairman so to do. Now we are by law legislating that media should have free access to the meetings of parliamentary committees, save for good reason, like security and other purposes. That is one of the key departures from the past. The other key departure is the introduction of key committees that were lacking in the previous parliaments. We now look at how we can have a committee dedicated to the constitutional commissions. We are now looking at how we can open our parliament for key governance leaders to come personally before the House, not through political appointees, to put across their case. We are now looking at the opportunity where we can cover areas like security, research, and intelligence. Now, we already have a committee on defense and interior, but Parliament needs to know more than that. That's just a matter of defense and interior. And we look at a committee on the economy, not just finance. You know? And so we are setting up more committees based on specialities. We're not going to have those large numbers again in the various committees. We're going to have dedicated limited numbers, not more than 15 in every committee for them to focus. And I want to take this opportunity to call on the media to also focus on specialization. You may not be only sending one representative to the House, because that one representative will not be able to cover all these committees. You need to have specialized personnel, so that if they are dealing with finance or economy, or they are dealing with intelligence and the rest, they are dealing with IT, you should have somebody that can report well and adequately for your media house. And that is why one of the areas I want us to do is how we can really detail our legislation on the conditions of service of the fourth arm of governance, the media. We cannot just allow it as just part of civil society. We have to focus on it, because without the media, you can never get democracy. And you can never get people of diverse backgrounds to work together. It's the media. And if you look at the Singapore experience, that is one of the facilitating instruments Lee Kuan Yew used to build Singapore to the state that we call it heaven on earth.
And so that was his response to the question on his position regarding the standing orders. And I'm sure you just heard him say that the standing orders of Parliament are subject to changes over time. He says it is in the pipeline for the House to approve the standing orders as constitutional instruments instead of approving them as resolutions. He also says that they are looking at opening up committees of Parliament to the media, for the media to scrutinize. How exciting that will be, that we will be there now they will not ask us media persons to leave. We will actually be there and scrutinize all the activities there. And also he says that the next session of Parliament will see the House getting a committee dedicated to constitutional commissions and also a committee for the economy. Well, at the risk of belaboring the point, I returned to the issue of the fisticuffs, and I returned to the issue of whether or not as Speaker he is proud of what has happened in Parliament in the last 1 year. The exchange of blows, the presence of military, and so on and so forth. So I asked him about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic. The Speaker did give me some very good answers. He says, first of all, just even before we show you exactly what he said, that he is definitely not proud of the fisticuffs. But there's a positive side. It then now indicates to Ghana and the rest of the world that the Parliament of Ghana no longer is a rubber stamp for any government. This was his answer.
For me, because of my experience all over the world, and I'm aware of this kind of kung fu fighting in various parliaments, Ghana was not counted among that. Now, globally, we are added to the number. I mean, it's something that we are all not proud of. Even though we know that before you can eat the egg, you have to break the shell. But you don't want to go through it yourself. You think that you have learned the lessons of those parliaments. I have a way of talking more, building consensus, than exchanging fire. And so these are not proud moments. I know that what we have achieved as a parliament for this year is giving hope to the people of Ghana that Parliament is now standing up to the almighty executive arm of government. Parliament is now moving away from the perception of being a rubber stamp to that of being an arm of government. That when governments bring business to Parliament, parliamentarians will have the guts and courage to say we disagree with government and not allow themselves to be co-opted by government to even approve things against their conscience. This is building confidence in the democratic system. It's a great achievement, and I hope we'll build on this as we move forward. I personally have always received from my colleagues, particularly my perceived former friend, Honorable Oseche Mensah-Bonsu, who everybody knew was a good friend of mine, because of the sudden change of personal attacks. On issues, I have no problem, because I don't know it all. We are all learning. But what prevents them from talking to me? I just heard a few days ago that the leadership of 10, together with my 2 deputies, have had workshops and dinners on how to work together many times. This came from the mouth of the majority leader. I was never informed of even one. If it happened, I was not informed. What happens is that their caucus meetings, I'm not part of it. And many times I'm not briefed. Even when I want to get the full complement of leadership, in the pre-sitting meetings in my lobby, for us to go through the agenda and agree to disagree on some issues and how to handle that disagreement, you don't get them forthcoming. So on the day of the fisticuffs, whilst I was in my lobby from 2 up to about 2:45, waiting on leadership, a few of them came, including the minority leader. All efforts to get the majority leader yielded no dividend. And so I later read from my WhatsApp that he said he wanted to start from 5. But from those who came to the lobby, the decision that agreed upon was to discuss the e-levy. That was the item for Monday, but the House was supposed to have adjourned on Friday. But that was outstanding business. The other members were begging the minority leader that there are other businesses, and they begged me to take it on. I said, what you agree is what I will do. When we went to the floor, the deputy minority leader raised a technical procedure issue, and he was on point. The business committee hadn't met, and therefore there was no business before the House. Because the business is presented by the business committee, the standing orders are very clear on it. But we had an order paper before us. So where did that order paper come from? There was no report from the business committee chaired by the majority leader. And there was an order paper produced by who? My first task as a speaker was how to resolve this issue. And I said, yes, you are right. And this was conceded by the majority chief whip, that he was right. But we should not adjourn proceedings. I agreed with him and decided that we should adopt the order paper that was before us as the business for the day on Monday. But if we intended going beyond Monday, then the business committee should present a report to the House so that we get to know the business for the next day, Tuesday. This I ruled, and I put the question, and the ayes have it. And then we decided to do the business. When I wanted to go to the business, which is the e-levy for the day, my attention was drawn to Order 53, which says that at the time they could urge the Speaker to vary the order of business for the day. And so I was asked to rather dwell on other businesses than the e-levy motion, which I did. And we handled about 6 other businesses. And I chaired from around that time till after 6 p.m., sitting for over 3 hours, presiding over other businesses, not the motion on the e-levy. And I was tired. And so I decided to hand over. I looked and I saw that my deputies were not on their seats. I sent my usher to look for them. He got only the first deputy speaker, who wasn't feeling well. So the first deputy speaker came to me, and I handed over to him with the instruction that handle these 2 statements. Seeing your state, I'll come back to take over. And then I now went 6 something to take my lunch. While taking my lunch, I saw the second deputy speaker take over from the first deputy speaker. And so I decided to relax and then see what was going to happen. And that is what I was watching. And I realized the focus was not initially on e-levy. They were discussing other matters again. And when they got to e-levy, an issue was raised. What was that issue? There was a sudden surprise of the e-levy being urgent business. And so the minority were right in saying that when government wants to inform Parliament that the business they are bringing to the House is urgent, is indicated in the papers that are presented. There was no such indication. And when it is indicated, a committee is set up to go into it to see whether that business is urgent or not urgent. There was nothing like that. So the finance committee cannot just come with a report and say that this is urgent business. And that was the initial exchanges. I thought these are things that leaders should sit and talk and come to agreement. As a speaker, when you try to rule one way or another, they tag you, they brand you, they categorize you. So most of the time, you hear us calling on the leaders to build consensus to guide the speaker. I left Parliament after 10 p.m. and I sent my closing remarks for the day, and that's for the session, through my usher to the second deputy speaker that at the conclusion of the debate, you read this as my closing remarks for the session. And I have a copy I can give to you. And so I'll give you notice. I will not be available to even read my closing remarks. And I left to my house. Because I was so tired, later I put off my dress. I fell on the bed and slept. It was after 12 that my wife woke me up to take my dinner. And then after that, I decided to go through social media. And there I found that the honorable members that left in the house dishonored themselves by exchanging blows. And when I investigated further, I thought that this was very unnecessary. And that, to be frank with you, my first deputy speaker was wrong in even announcing that he was going to vote. And nobody could stop him from doing that. And so when the second deputy speaker voted, he then called on him to come and take over so that he will also now go and vote. And that is why when he bent down for the second to take over, the minority members rushed to prevent that from happening. That's what led to the fisticuffs. And it meant that we haven't still moved away from this unbridled partisanship to the national interest. I've given a ruling on how deputy speakers should preside over the House, when they could vote and when they could not vote. That guidance I've given to the House and to the country. I think when I was reading it, they were making so much noise that they did not even hear what I said. If they had listened and if appreciated it and gone to the literature and the experience of other parliaments, that wouldn't have happened. Now, you were told before that the Speaker of Parliament in Ghana is not a member of Parliament. That is true. I'm not a member of Parliament. I'm the Speaker of Parliament. And the Speaker is for everybody. You were told that as a Speaker, I don't take decisions for the House. It's the members who take decisions. That is right. I only handle practice and procedure and guide the House to take the decisions. Now, what happened on the floor, on decision taking, I'm being said to be the cause of it. So, where are we now? So this blame game will not wash. It will not. It was a low blow to me. And that is one of the lowest points of the Parliament of the Fourth Republic. Since 1993, we've never moved to this stage. We got there now. And therefore, we need to have cool heads, clear minds, the spirit of give and take, compromises, consensus building to surmount this. Well, for the next 3 years, you cannot change the composition of the House. It will continue to be a hung parliament. You can decide to handle what number of by-elections, but I can tell you, it will not change the composition. In the 2000 elections, the differences were that close. The outcome of the 2000 elections, I was minority leader. J.H. Mensah was the leader of government business. For the first 6 months, we were able to handle the House. When he left, they handed it over to Papa, Osu and Kuma. We were able to handle the House. Even when the late Right Honorable Peter Alajete erred in coming to attack me on the floor, based on a publication in Ghanaian Palava, who thought the source of that information was from me. So he wrote a damning piece to come and attack me. And when I heard, I was shocked. I had no knowledge of it. And so I stood up to intervene, and he denied me. Papa and Kuma stood up and told him that it was wrong. Because even by our rules, you cannot attack the conduct of a member of parliament on the floor. And that once he's talking about me, it is right for him to give me the opportunity to talk. He said, no. That was the day I walked out to my office and the media followed me. And I said, I'll go after him. That is the only incident that I recall. Later on, when we met and sat and the explanation came, he realized that he was attacking the wrong person. I hadn't even seen that communication. And that is the only time. Throughout my leadership, from 2001 up to date, I have never interfered into the function of speakers. Not even at the board level. But today, as I said, there is a change. And now I'm prepared to accept this change. I'm prepared to accept the criticism. But I want genuine criticisms. I want to at least be consulted before I'm criticized. And all this period I'm talking about, the time that I was seated there, the majority leader only showed his face and then sent a text to me that was around 4:30 that he was now going to have a bite and to come back to the house. He also whispered to my usher to inform me he was going to have a bite and to come back. And I presided till after 6. When I left, he wasn't on the floor. How can you now lead your team to now be attacking me and saying that I should lead? In fact, one of them said, I should learn how to lead. It's because the level of leadership I'm at, he doesn't understand it. And that is someone who claimed to be my son, the honorable member for Efutu, the deputy majority leader, Honorable Afenyo Marken. You come and you personally attack me, then you come to the house and you expect that we should have that spirit of consensus building. Things don't work that way. Whether you like it or not, today, the Right Honorable Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin is the Speaker of Parliament. How you have to work together is what we should be focused on to make sure that we push the development agenda further. Others will come and continue from where we've taken it to, and then that will be a better place for all of us to live in. And so these are some of the things that I feel sad about. And I'm really very passionate about it. And I think we could do things differently. But sometimes I want to continue to say this. It's not politicians who develop a country. No. If you leave the development of a country to politicians, they will deepen the differences in the country. That is why at the inception of the independence and democracy in the United States of America, the founding father, George Washington, spoke against party politics. He was afraid that the states that have come together will be divided along those party lines and they will not be able to build the union. That is why especially the late Jerry John Rawlings also doubted democracy based on partisan politics. And that's why during his governance, you realize his appointments was such that he was cutting across the political divide, CPP, MPP divide. And at the end of the day, he didn't want to continue. But because of those fears, they decided to establish a third force, which was the National Democratic Congress. But because of the incumbency and the immediate impact it has made in Ghanaians and in development, that party won the elections and continued to grow and is now the great National Democratic Congress. And so we will need to be able to get non-political leaders to intervene to get this going. And some have been playing very good roles. You can talk about the Conference of Catholic Bishops. You can talk about the Christian Council. You can talk about the chiefs led by our own King, His Majesty Otufo Setutu the First. You know, they are all playing their roles. And you can talk about the chief imam who is highly respected in this country, and then the Ahmadiyya leader, Maulvi Wahab Adam, now taken over by Maulvi bin Saleh. You know, the roles they play are so key that we should be able to formalize them and make them part of the governance structure of the country. Not just allow the institutional structures, like you say, Council of State, and the Council of State are appointed by the President. And it's kind of difficult for them to say things publicly. They may be able to say them in private with the President, but those are pieces of advice. If the President doesn't take them, what do? They can't come publicly to expose it. And that's why sometimes we perceive them to be weak, and sometimes refer to them as errand boys of the President, because the President sometimes say, go and represent me at this function, which President should not be doing. They should move away from it. But I have engaged all players, and I have met His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo a number of times. And I have met all the others I'm talking about and listen to their counsel. But I always don't run away from sharing what I'm sharing with all Ghanaians about my understanding of multi-party democracy has been practiced from country to country, have been willing to build their own, and that will build our own. So from next year, apart from the focus on corruption, you will see me not only speaking, but acting to change even the dress code and the code of conduct of members of parliament. As leaders, we must show the way. We must show the direction. And so you will not be seeing me often again with that dress code, a suit, and that aristocratic cloak or gown. You may be seeing me more with traditional dresses. I may use that only for ceremonial occasions, which is what is in the literature of Ghana concerning that cloak and gown. It's for only ceremonial occasions. So those who know former speakers, you see former Speaker Asedu wearing a kente and a shirt. And that is what is the portrait we have today. And so we have to change all that. Because we have to provide the market for our produce. We cannot continue to rely on what others manufacture and sell to us when we ourselves are capable of even manufacturing better ones.
Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honourable Alban Bagbin, responding to my question on the good, the bad and the ugly of Parliament. And then he began by, of course, again reiterating the fact that he isn't at all proud of the recent happenings in the Parliament, and that he thinks there are alternative ways of resolving some of these issues in the House, and moving forward, those alternatives will be sought for and used. He also says that Parliament represents the people, and it is seen in their dealings that it is necessary to be seen in their dealings that Parliament has not become a rubber stamp of the executive arm of government. And that's one good takeaway of the first year of the 8th Parliament. So as we began to wrap up the conversation with the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, I, of course, did ask him what you, on your behalf, I did ask him what you should expect of Parliament in the coming years. Are we going to continue to see some of the unfortunate scenes? Is anything going to change? He gave me a very interesting answer.
We have been doing well in some areas, but doing badly in others. Ghanaians are known to be peace-loving, tolerant people. That has been going on well till a stage where we can no longer take that peaceful nature and tolerance for granted. And that is why we are now experiencing violence at even elections, which has now shown its ugly face on the floor of Parliament. It meant that the patience, the peacefulness of Ghanaians, and the tolerance level is come down seriously. And we cannot take that for granted. We have successfully held a number of elections, but the cost to the nation has been colossal. At almost every election, the investment into the election process is unheard of anywhere in the world. And the Ghanaian elections are very expensive. In spite of all that, because of the nature of the politics of patronage, the politics of co-optation, the politics of lack of values and principles, we see at the exercise of the right to vote, people being dishonest. And that leads to violence. That is degenerating, and we need to address it. And so this next session, as I said, I'm pandering civil society to help Parliament to legislate on key areas that can sanitize campaigns, political parties, particularly funding and financing. Funding of political parties and financing of political campaigns. We have to look at the best practices and adapt and adopt them to suit our purposes as a country, to make sure that we stop this wasteful expenditure of huge billions of Ghanaian cedis every 4 years to nothingness. That is one of the things we work on seriously. And I believe that at the end of the 4 years, we have properly positioned Ghana and positioned the institutions of governance, not only the executive, but the legislature and the judiciary. So in all my submissions, I always ask the judiciary. And you see that in the budgetary allocations, I've always been emphasizing that we need some amount to be able to implement this vision. The vision as captured on the Directive Principles of State Policy, Chapter 6 of the 1992 Constitution. You will need to strengthen the other arms of government to be able to ensure that the resources that we all contribute, that the power that we all give to the executive are used only for the interests of all of us. And that is why I requested right out from my first meeting with the president that at least the first year, which is 2021, Parliament should be giving 1% of total revenue. And the judiciary should be giving not less than 1% of total revenue. The 98% of total revenue should go to the executive and the state institutions.
That was my conversation with the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, Honourable Alban Sumana Bagbin. He's been talking to us on a number of issues, particularly on the issues of the violence in Parliament and how he intends to manage situations like that moving forward. That's it for tonight. We will be back with another edition. Until then, even as we prepare for the new year, please be safe out there, celebrate in moderation, and generally, let's see you next year. Have a very good night and Happy New Year in advance. Bye-bye.
When the voices that matter speak. When the voices that matter speak, they speak to GBC.